Welcome to this next installment of the Cold Steel Summaries. We'll begin right where we left off as spring turns to summer for Rean and his friends. It's time to delve further into Class VII's field studies. Now let's dive right in. Chapter 3 begins in mid-June during a rainy spell. Midterms have quickly crept up on Class 7, and the fact that each student's individual rank and the overall class average will be publicized only adds to the anxiety. The classmates are planning to study in groups when Laura oddly turns down an opportunity to join the girls. Rean swears he saw Laura glance at Fee before she left the classroom. All around campus, Rean's classmates are studying in pairs. He stops by each one to brush up on various subjects and figures that reviewing material with his instructors isn't a bad idea either. On his way back to the dorms, Rean crosses paths with a woman in a maid uniform who asks him where she can find the principal's office. She addresses him as Master Rean while saying goodbye despite the fact he never introduced himself to her. Just moments later, Elisa is heading back to the dorms herself, so they head back together. They engage in some friendly banter before discussing the upcoming exams. Apparently, Elisa got the third highest scores in their class on the entrance exams. Plus, she used to get the top scores back in Ruhr, an impressive feat for a city that size. After a moment of consideration, she shyly presses Rean that he must be curious about her family and background after all this time. Of course he is, but he won't pry since he figures she must have a good reason not to talk about it. Though speaking of mysterious meetings, Rean tells Elisa about the maid in her mid-20s that he crossed paths with. Elisa ponders for a few seconds, trying to convince herself it can't be who she thinks it is. Her supposed suspicion can't be confirmed though, since Rean didn't catch a name. The long week of midterms begins the next day. All those study groups sure are paying off as Rean continuously encounters material he's familiar with. To everyone's relief, all Thors students are rewarded with a free day at the end of their grueling exam period. Class 7 is truly starting to look like a group of real friends as they walk back to the dorms together. They gossip about what instructor Sarah could possibly have planned since she had to depart overnight from the academy. Perhaps it's a rendezvous with a secret lover? Nah. They all conclude that must be impossible for someone like her. They also wonder what's up with Laura and Fee since the two have been avoiding each other ever since the beginning of the month. Machias wonders if it could be related to the information shared when both groups turned in their last field study reports. Machias couldn't help but notice an unpleasant expression on Laura's face when she learned that Fee was previously part of a Jaeger Corps. Speaking of people who remain tight-lipped regarding themselves, Elisa has been very secretive of her family origins. The girl in question is just worried that if they knew, it would make things awkward between them all. Right at that moment, the maid Rean ran into the other day exits their dorms and welcomes Lady Elisa back. The latter responds in sheer disbelief that Sharon is here. The servant of the Reinford family, Sharon demurely explains that she was sent here by the chairman herself to be the new caretaker of Class 7's dorm. The next morning, the students start off their day with an extravagant Erebonian breakfast, as prepared by Sharon. Eustace even compares the spread to what would be found in the Duke's household. Elisa is clearly displeased with this entire situation, and even had a major argument with Sharon the day before. She thought she was finally able to get away from her mother, but of course she just had to send Sharon here to belittle her independence. Elisa can take care of herself perfectly fine, thank you very much. Why would her mom send Sharon here when she must definitely be busier than Elisa or any of her friends? Despite her master's foul mood, Sharon skillfully begins winning points back already by offering Elisa her favorite jam. After breakfast, Rean picks up the task sent from the student council and begins his free day. He helps Vincent Florold find his secret admirer, the lovely, ever so confident Margarita. Next, he gets the exhilarating opportunity to help Angie and George test out the Orbital bike. Toa and Crow show up to watch how Rean does, and he definitely doesn't disappoint. Now it's time for the monthly exploration of the old schoolhouse. So Rean calls over some classmates to back him up. They descend to the newly accessible 3rd floor and eventually make it to the powerful mob at the end. Rean shares his musings regarding the same exact pattern all 3 of their explorations have followed so far. The main takeaway makes it seem like something or someone is testing them. To wrap up the day, Rean helps Monk recover his lost Misty stickers. Then he makes his way back to the dorm. Instructor Sarah is returning from her overnight trip just as Rean is about to enter. He says her hot date must not have gone so well, judging from Sarah's mumbling. Though she looks confused at first, she picks up on it quickly and plays along, bragging about how wonderfully it went. Suddenly, Sharon welcomes them back, which completely catches Sarah off guard. Though the 2 women look like they're introducing themselves for the first time, something definitely feels off. That night, Rean reads a letter from his little sister, Elise. His reminiscing starts off with happy memories, but eventually reaches one that appears particularly painful. He turns on the radio to Aubin time to help get his mind off it. The results of the midterm exams are released a few days later. Everyone in Class 7 has done well, even Fee, who started off way behind on her studies earlier in the school year. Emma and Machias have received the same exact score, tying for first, with 3rd place scorer Eustace not far behind them. Rean and Elisa scored 7th and 8th respectively, with 4 students of Class 7 making the top 10. It's no surprise that their entire class had the highest average score. Class 1 can't believe they were outdone by so many commoners, with 4th place overall scorer Patrick appearing particularly displeased. That afternoon, Sarah praises her students on their combined accomplishment, then summons a combat shell to begin their practical exam. Rean and Fee notice how it looks similar to the object that was escaping Oryx's fort last chapter, but before they can commence the exam, they are interrupted by Patrick and his noble posse. He claims that Class 1 has a free study period today, so what better timing to have a cross-class exchange than at this moment? He looks forward to displaying the refined spirit of the Erebonian nobility to them all. Sarah actually finds this challenge interesting and tells Rean to choose the classmates that will be participating with him, though Patrick limits Rean's choices only to a certain group of people. In the end, all the boys of common blood are singled out. Then the fight begins. Unfortunately for Patrick, the duel doesn't go as well as he'd have hoped, and soon he's the only one left standing. Once he's defeated, his entire team is left kneeling in shame. Good guy Rean offers a hand to the high arms boy, but he's slapped away. Patrick angrily seethes that just because Rean was graciously taken in by the Schwarzer family doesn't make him a true noble. He hurls filthy slurs at Elisa, Gaius, and Fee, an action that even his noble posse believes is crossing the line. Gaius finally confronts Patrick, asking him what makes the nobility better. His homeland has no class system, so he's genuinely curious as to what elevates nobles above everyone else. Patrick's response is that it's clearly obvious. Their distinguished families, built on a lineage of tradition, gives them a dignity and pride that commoners will never possess. Gaius can see why tradition and dignity are important, but those things still don't give nobles any right to say the things he did. His conduct is a far cry from what Laura and Eustace of Class VII display. Sarah dispels the tension and sends Patrick and his posse off. She then hands her students their field study placements for the month. It looks like Laura and Fee will be spending a lot of time together. As for Rean's group, they'll be traveling to Gaius's homeland, the Nord Highlands. In fact, they'll be staying with Gaius's very settlement. The morning of the trip, they wonder if they'll need to gather snacks for their long 8-hour train ride. There's no need for worry on that front though. Sharon has prepared an entire lunch that they can take with them. Once the students have left, Sarah asks Sharon when she will be returning. All the maid can say is that she'll be back before the rest of the students return. The two groups of students split up to board their respective transfer rides at Heimdall Station. In the distance, a girl with long black hair watches Rean's group head off. Then, moments later, a blonde-haired girl approaches and teases her friend that she must have sighted her brother. The playful banter continues until Captain Claire arrives to escort the two to the Imperial villa. Gaius explains some basics of the Nord Highlands while on board the train. His people still dwell in nomadic tribes and are well known for their excellently bred and raised horses. In fact, most of the Imperial Army's war horses are descended from the Highland stock. The trade of raising horses even serves as one of Nord's main sources of income. Sharon has somehow arrived before them on their short transfer in Ruhr. The only way she could possibly have gotten here so quickly is aboard an airship, which just happens to be the reason she had the opportunity to prepare a whole other meal for them in the aircraft's kitchen. Elisa's mom, Chairman Irina, stops by to introduce herself, but she is a busy woman, so she turns to leave immediately after. This behavior prompts Elisa's outburst that all she cares about is work. Her mom's only response to her neglected daughter is that she won't force her to take over the company, even if she chooses to be irresponsible like a certain someone. Despite her overloaded schedule, Chairman Irina must still keep abreast of Class VII's work, since she also just happens to serve on Thors' board of directors. With things to attend to, she departs as her daughter drops to her knees in shock. Just when she thought she was gaining some distance from her mom, it turns out that she's enrolled at the very school she sits on the board for. The distinguished Lieutenant General Vander, widely known in the military as One-Eyed Zex, greets the students when they arrive at Zender Gate. As he leads them outside, the group can't help but gaze in awe at the breathtaking sight of the Highlands. They're lent some fine steeds and depart for Gaius's settlement immediately to beat the setting sun. Upon the party's arrival, the Warzel siblings rush over to give their brother a warm welcome. Gaius's parents follow shortly after and welcome all the students into their encampment for a cozy home-cooked meal. They emphasize how Nord and Erebonia have been close friends and allies ever since Emperor Dreikel's time. Because of this, the ever-increasing attempts of the Calvard Republic to curry favor with the people here spells of a foreboding future. Though this reality is something they need to be aware of, the kids should not worry themselves over this, since they are still only just students. Gaius leads his friends to their lodgings for the weekend, then bids them good night to return to his family's hut. Rean awakens at dawn to the baying of sheep. He's feeling surprisingly well rested right as Gaius arrives to wake the rest of them up. They eventually head over to his father and receive their field study tasks from him. They collect medicinal ingredients for the settlement's doctor, deliver goods to the Imperial watchtower at the Calvardian border, and exterminate a large monster for Zender Gate. They learn from Lieutenant General Vander that Gaius had saved him from a pack of wild beasts the year before. In return, it was the least he could do to write a strong recommendation to Thors on Gaius's behalf. The students break for lunch back at the settlement, then receive their afternoon tasks. One of these involves escorting Imperial Chronicle reporter Norton to a massive stone giant lodged in the side of a cliff. Gaius says it's called the Guardian of the Highlands, though not much else is known about this ancient landmark. Norton shares that there's actually a similar statue on Brionia Island, the location that Group B was sent to. Looking at it, Eustace is reminded of the legend of the Great Knight, a mysterious Erebonian myth that varies from region to region. Just then, Rean clutches the scar on his chest, which draws particular attention from Emma. Right as they're returning to the settlement, they find that the settlement's truck has malfunctioned and crashed. Thankfully, no one was injured, and Elisa has the know-how to diagnose the problem. However, she doubts she'll be able to actually repair it. They're in luck though, since a skilled elderly technician, who originally hails from the Empire, is living in a cabin at nearby Lake Lacrima. Elisa appears deeply pensive leading up to this meeting, and for good reason too, since she makes the shocking discovery that this is where her grandfather has been all these years. Easygoing Gwyn, the former chairman of the Rhineford group, treats this reunion much like any other day, however. Oddly enough, they're being watched by the strange blue-haired girl from last chapter as they ride back to the settlement site. Once the repairs are done, the settlement throws a feast for Gwyn. Elisa tells Emma she's heading outside just to get some fresh air, though it's obvious that something is on her mind. Since he's such a great listener, Emma asks Rean if he could go check up on her. Underneath the countless stars, Elisa finally opens up about her family's situation. Her father, a skilled technician, passed away 8 years ago, which caused her mother, a woman who used to treasure her family, to double down on expanding the Rhineford company. It reached the point where she would make time to have dinner with her daughter only once every 3 months. Obviously, this hurt Elisa, but at least she had her grandfather and Sharon. Gwyn taught her various hobbies such as horseback riding and the violin, while Sharon taught her self-defense and high society etiquette. Those two were really the only company she had, since she didn't fit in as the typical commoner or noble kid. As for the Rhineford Company, while they've always been an arms manufacturer, Elisa believes they finally crossed the line with the construction of the railway guns that are currently held at Gorelia Fortress. Gwyn supervised the project, though it was Irina who initially signed off on it. Feeling guilty and conflicted on whether to hand it over to the Imperial Army, Gwyn's indecision gave his own daughter the opportunity to go behind his back and betray him. Elisa's mom consolidated the support of Rhineford's shareholders, the Rogner family, and the top brass in the military behind her vision. Faced with this overwhelming pressure, Elisa's grandfather stepped down as chairman and left the company altogether. Though Elisa isn't happy about the railway guns, what bothers her most is how her mother's actions tore her family apart. Rean is glad that Elisa was finally able to share honestly, and she responds that she wouldn't have had the strength if it weren't for Rean and Class VII. Rean opens up a bit about his own adoptive family. about how he's always felt rather lost despite the love his parents and sister showed him. Elisa gives Rean a taste of his own medicine with a cheesy yet heartfelt line. Then, with the absolute perfect timing and snark, Eustace loudly clears his throat and repeats Elisa word for word. The five friends all spend a bit more time together under the gorgeous stars before heading to bed. That night, the sentries stationed at the Imperial watchtower are met with an unwelcome disturbance. They're wondering why a force as distinguished as the 3rd Armored Division is stationed way out here when they spot explosions going off at Calvard's military base. Mere moments later, the Imperial watchtower goes up in flames as well. News of the attack brings an end to the students' peaceful morning. At the border, tense patrols of Calvardian and Imperial airships fly above as Lieutenant General Vander assesses the grim casualties. Gaius' settlement begins preparations to relocate to safer grounds farther north, while Rean's party escorts reporter Norton back to Zender Gate. A tank platoon is getting ready to deploy when they finally reach the Lieutenant General. It's actually perfect timing that they arrived when they did, since he wants them aboard the train departing for Ruhr in 30 minutes. This place is likely just hours away from a major battle. According to the initial investigation, it's believed that the Calvardians sabotaged their own base in order to instigate a conflict with Erebonia. However, this makes little sense in light of the news that the Calvardian base suffered greater structural damages compared to that suffered by the Imperial army. Unfortunately though, the army just doesn't have the time for further investigation. Gaius ponders silently for a moment before requesting a chance to conduct his own investigation. Nord is his homeland, and he knows it like the back of his hand. Gaius is lucky to have such supportive friends, since they're willing to risk their safety as well, even if they aren't natives of Nord themselves. The Lieutenant General gives the group until 12:30 p.m., a little less than 2 hours, to scope out the situation. Gaius expresses his gratitude as they all ride out to the watchtower. Hearing him describe his deep love for his homeland, Eustace wonders why he ever left it in the first place to enroll at the academy. As it so happens, a traveling priest taught Gaius much about the history of the continent, the growing tensions between the major powers, and the inevitability of Nord being drawn into the conflict eventually. The other students are surprised to learn that Gaius was concerned with such weighty topics at such a young age. He left his beloved homeland for Erebonia in order to learn more about the outside world and Nord's place in it. The others appreciate Gaius opening up to them and assure him that they'll do all they can to bring a peaceful resolution to this dire situation. Strangely enough, Elisa finds mortar shells that were manufactured by the Reinford Company in the ruins of the watchtower. Now, why would the Republic use weapons made by the Empire? Furthermore, the heaviest damage to the watchtower occurred at an angle that stems from the Highlands, not the Republican border. Lastly, a grieving Private Zatz recalls explosions going off at the Republican base only moments before the watchtower was struck. If both attacks really happened around the same time, it would make little sense that either army is responsible. With these tips, Rean's party concludes that a third party is likely most responsible. Emma's math whiz skills, coupled with information provided by Elisa and Gaius, are able to locate the rough area from which the mortars were fired. The party scours this area and comes across a suspicious rope ladder on the edge of a cliff. Emma suggests Elisa shoot it down with an arrow, even though the latter claims she's not that good of a shot. They have no other option though, so Elisa goes ahead and prepares an orbital arrow. Just as she's about to fire, Emma secretly does something that only Rean takes notice of, to empower the shot. Up on the cliff, they come across some old Rhineford mortars that look like they've just been fired recently. Then they spot the strange blue-haired girl who flies off on her white orbital doll. The party chases her on horseback all the way to the top of some ancient ruins, where she laments the misunderstanding at being painted the bad guy. Realizing that they may actually be helpful to her mission, the energetic Millium decides to test out their skills. The students are drawn into battle against her strange orbital machine and eventually defeat her. Then Millium comes clean after her loss. She asks them for assistance in capturing those responsible for last night's attack. The actual perpetrators appear to be Jaeger dropouts who are doing this job for a hefty sum of mira. She saw them escape to the northern area of the highlands. The entire party agrees to help her, even Eustace, though he does demand an explanation for her infiltration into Oryx's fort last chapter. Take note that she mysteriously is in possession of an Arcus unit already. On their way north, they witness a Republican airship brazenly flying in Nord airspace right above the settlement. They inform Lieutenant General Vander of their findings over the orbital phone, then head for the ancient quarry. The massive stone door is no match for Millium and Lammy. Then they all step inside. Gaius senses a strange wind that Emma picks up on as well, and their battle with the incoming monsters only confirms that the higher elements are present here. The party eventually creeps up on some Jaeger dropouts and a bespectacled man. The latter recognizes them as the kids who interfered with their plans in Celtic, then introduces himself as Gideon, or simply just G. He challenges the students, though he and the dropouts are eventually defeated. Millium identifies the group as the wannabe Jaegers called Bugbear. Her odd knowledge of this otherwise classified intel confirms G's inkling that she must be one of those children, specifically the White Rabbit. He must make the most of this opportunity if she is here. He plays an ominous melody on an old flute, which summons a massive arachnid beast that viciously snacks on one of the Jaeger dropouts as G makes his escape. Rean and the others make it out alive somehow, then return ASAP to Zender Gate with the apprehended Bugbear troops. But despite all their efforts, the Republican army is unwilling to heed to the Imperial's explanation of the situation. Thankfully, though, Lecter Arundel, the captain of the Imperial Intelligence Division, arrives just in time to negotiate with the Republic. With the trade conference only 2 months away, the Chancellor believes it's absolutely necessary to maintain diplomacy. Lecter thanks Rean and the others for watching over Millium, then the two Ironbloods depart together. Even the Lieutenant General knows the situation is in good hands, given that Lecter, aka Scarecrow, has never failed in an unofficial negotiation. Everyone basks in the beautiful sunset, relieved that war was averted today. Later that night, Gideon meets with the Black Masked Man once again. G is none too pleased with how things panned out today, but the Masked Man says the outcome was still advantageous to their ultimate plan, a plan that neither the Icy Maiden nor the Scarecrow will be able to stop. Instructor Sarah steps out into the open once G's airship takes off and takes note that it looks like one of Rhineford's latest models. She wonders how they were able to get a hold of one. Then she tells a hidden individual to show themselves. Sharon is impressed that Sarah knew she was here, as the latter smugly attributes her find to a familiar sensation she had 2 years ago. Sharon appears confused, so Sarah just drops it. As for the suspicious black ship, the competent maid has already looked over all of Rhineford's official files and has found no such record of it. In the morning, Rean and the other students say goodbye to the settlement, paying particular attention to Gaius's family and Gwyn. Rather heartwarmingly, Gaius leaves things up to his brother Toma, and Elisa tells her grandfather that she can finally understand why he left the company. Elisa strengthens her resolve to develop her own worldview, one that's different from her grandfather's or mother's, for the sake of the company's future. Sarah, Sharon, and the students then depart back to Trista, bringing an end to Chapter 3. The next chapter opens up at Valflame Palace, where Captain Claire is reporting to Chancellor Osborne about the situation that occurred in Nord. They failed to apprehend the mastermind this time, so they must be prepared for the next opportunity. She predicts that the terrorists will show at next month's trade conference, so Osborne leaves the logistics to Claire, since that is her specialty. In another section of the palace, Prince Olivert is outlining the upcoming trade conference to his little brother. The young heir feels inadequate that he has to be educated on basic politics like this, and worries if he'll really be able to uphold his father's reputation when he eventually succeeds the throne. Olivert encourages his brother and lifts his spirits, prompting Cedric to become more animated as he shares of his admiration for Chancellor Osborne and his strong-willed leadership. Before Olivert can comment, Princess Alphen strolls in, chiding her twin for being so worried about politics when he should be enjoying his youth. Now that they're on a lighter topic, Olivert asks her if she's decided on her dance partner for the upcoming garden party. She teasingly admits that she has someone in mind, but isn't sure he'll say yes. Which reminds her, by the way, she has a proposal to discuss with her older brother. We fast forward to Thors in mid-July to, you guessed it, the obligatory summer swimming lessons. Sorry, there are no bikinis, but everyone's still looking quite fine. Given the nature of these classes, Rean can no longer hide the scar on his chest, a scar that he's had ever since he could remember. To no one's surprise, the swim club's Laura is the speediest one of Class 7. Then, in front of everyone, she approaches Fee and directly challenges her. Before the race commences, Laura demands the other girl not to make light of their competition by holding back like she always does. Instructor Sarah chimes in to remind Fee that this isn't like the battlefield she grew up on. Going all out against others is a healthy way to improve. With that, the exhilarating race almost ends in a tie, though it's Laura who ekes out just the slightest lead in the end. The girls good-naturedly acknowledge the other's skill, though the mood sours when Laura asks Fee why she consistently chooses not to utilize her full ability. The latter responds that it's just too much effort, which obviously doesn't sit well with the girl who puts her all into everything she does. After classes are dismissed, the guys all gather together, while 3 of the girls do the same. Fee remains seated at her desk all alone, the only one of her classmates not socializing. After a few moments, she abruptly rises and leaves the room by herself, prompting Emma to run after her. All the guys look to Rean, thinking the same exact thing. Their class's best mediator has to do something to help Laura and Fee reach an understanding. Later in the afternoon, Rean comes across what sounds like Emma having a chat with someone unfamiliar to him. To his surprise, he finds Emma and a familiar black cat when he turns the corner. She awkwardly comes up with the excuse that she was just answering a call on her Arcus, but Rean sure doesn't seem to buy it. Before heading off with the cat, Emma introduces her feline friend as Celine. Rean is making his way back to the dorms when he's stopped by Instructor Neidhart. The latter has read the report on what happened in Nord and wished to recognize the efforts of Rean and his classmates. However, he's still disappointed in their brash conduct, though perhaps Class 7 owes their lack of decorum to their instructor. Rean asks about Sarah's background, but speak of the devil, she shows up just in time to keep her secrets from getting leaked. Instructor Thomas also appears with oddly perfect timing to break up Sarah and Neidhart's tense standoff. Rean makes his escape by basically selling Sarah out, much to her dismay. No matter what she or Neidhart say, Instructor Thomas remains adamant about enjoying some faculty bonding time over some drinks. The next morning, Rean gets started on those student council tasks bright and early during the free day. One involves some low-key matchmaking across social class divides, what with reuniting the childhood friends Alan, a commoner, and Bridget, a noblewoman. Alan has been in a slump ever since his crushing loss to Patrick in fencing club and has been taking his frustration out on everyone else. Rean helps the guy regain his confidence by training with him, prompting Alan to make up with Bridget right after. It's now time for this month's investigation of the old schoolhouse. They descend to the newly opened 4th floor and encounter the same mysterious higher elements phenomena that occurred back in Nord. Once the powerful beasts are defeated, a massive red door materializes in the elevator room. Rean feels a strange resonance in his chest and hears the words "reveal" echo in his mind, though he shares this information with no one. No matter what they try, the door just won't open. Rean and a handful of Class 7 are about to head back to the dorms when his little sister Elise shows up. She demurely introduces herself before asking if she could have a private word with her brother. Up on the school rooftop, Elise admits that she's a bit miffed at him since he only lives 50 minutes away, yet hasn't made any effort to visit in the 6 months he's been here. Rean sheepishly apologizes and comes clean with his worry that she's fed up with him since she seemed distant the last time they were together. Elise can't possibly reveal her crush on him, though the two are able to clear up this misunderstanding. She then addresses the main reason she came to visit today and pulls out the most recent letter he sent to her. What did he mean when he said he won't be returning home after graduation? He can't be thinking of quietly stepping down from succeeding their father as a head of the Schwarzer family. But to her horror, this is exactly what Rean intends to do. He was merely adopted into the nobleman's life, so Elise should find a good man to marry and have him become the next Baron Schwarzer. Honestly, Rean feels guilty for all that their father has had to endure ever since adopting him, including such baseless rumors that accuse him of having been unfaithful to his wife and fathering a bastard son. Elise can't believe that Rean has so terribly gotten the wrong idea of how she and their parents truly feel. She cruelly lashes out at him in her despair before storming off in tears. Turns out Rean's classmates were eavesdropping on the whole thing and tell him to hurry up and go after her. Elise is lamenting Rean's inability to consider his own happiness and her own failure at being honest with him. When she finally realizes she's lost, Patrick crosses paths with her right at this exact moment and recognizes her as a noblewoman due to her Saint Estrella uniform. She politely introduces herself as Elise Schwarzer, which initially prompts some seething mumbling from Patrick. Realizing that he must be on bad terms with her brother, Elise curtly excuses herself and runs off in the direction of the old schoolhouse. On the other side of campus, Rean is growing worried that Elise is still nowhere to be found. Crow strolls over and is surprised to learn that Rean has a younger sister. So she must have been the girl who was talking with the High Arms kid. Crow leads Rean to just outside the old schoolhouse, where the older brother instincts immediately kick into high gear. Patrick better not have hurt Elise. The flustered noble claims he did no such thing, and that he ran after her in concern. Unfortunately for the three of them, Elise entered the strangely unlocked building to follow the Black Cat Celine in. The elevator descends all by itself to the 4th floor, and once Elise steps in front of the ominous red door, a voice announces the commencement of the first trial as a massive suit of armor emerges. The guys follow Elise's terrified scream, then comes the moment where we witness Rean's terrifying, otherworldly power for the very first time. He does some solid damage to the beast all by himself, before eventually regaining his senses via focusing on the memories he's made with Class 7. Crow lends Rean a hand while leaving it to Patrick to check up on Elise. The two boys are able to defeat the powerful foe thanks to their combat links. It sure is a great thing that Crow took part in that trial Class 7 last year. Elise thanks her brother for saving her, just as Instructor Sarah and the rest of his classmates arrive via the elevator. Emma notices Celine's presence and gives her a stern look as the scene shifts to everyone seeing Elise off at the train station the next morning. She apologizes to her brother for all the trouble she's caused due to her carelessness, but Class 7 good-naturedly gangs up on Rean for being insensitive to her feelings. Though she still can't accept Rean's intent to leave the family, it looks like he's making an effort to figure himself out with his classmates' help. Then she's sent off with a typical Rean head pat.
We fast forward to the practical exam. Instructor Sarah tells Rean he doesn't have to participate this month, but he feels more than recovered and is ready to go. With that being the case, Rean and a partner of his choosing are the first ones up. Sarah selects Laura and Fee as their opponents, but despite the girls' individual skill, their lack of teamwork costs them the match. The students learn that they're headed to Heimdall for their field study, and lo and behold, Rean has been placed in Laura and Fee's group. He can't help but feel like he's being used again as Sarah feigns innocence. On the morning of their field study, both groups board the same train to Heimdall and discuss the basics of the city during the ride. As the capital of Erebonia, it's no surprise that it boasts one of the largest populations of the entire continent at 800,000. Crossbell City in comparison has a population of 500,000. Heimdall is divided up into 16 main districts, each one as big as any town in Erebonia's other provinces. Captain Claire of the RNP greets them upon their arrival, since she will be providing a suitable meeting area for the students and the individual who has prepared their field study duties. Rean and the others would have never expected Governor Karl Regnitz to make the time to do this for their class. In the RMP briefing room, a flabbergasted Marcius has just learned that his dad also happens to serve on Thors Academy's board of directors, right alongside Alyssa's mum and Eustace's brother. Governor Regnitz hands them their field study envelopes and keys to their lodgings for the weekend. As much as he'd like to spend more time with them, he must return to the annual summer festival preparations. Once Class 7 steps out into the city, the Heimdall natives Marcius and Elliot specifically point out the Orbital tram system that they'll find throughout the city. These trams are incredibly affordable for the average citizen and serve as the main form of public transportation between the capital's 16 districts. With that, Rean's group heads off to Alto Street where Elliot lives, and with his friend's insistence, he leads everyone to his home nearby. A woman descends the stairs and immediately envelops Elliot in a hug. After the siblings' heartfelt reunion, Elliot's sister introduces herself to everyone over tea. They've arrived at a great time since she happens to have the day off from teaching piano lessons. Marcius asks if their entire family are musicians, given Elliot's skill at the violin as well. It turns out that their father couldn't carry a tune to save his life, but he is a busy man who has little time for other pursuits. Elliot sheepishly adds that he works in the Imperial army, then Marcius finally puts 2 and 2 together. Elliot's father is the Olaf Craig, the Lieutenant General of the entire Imperial army. He's otherwise known as Craig the Red and leads Erebonia's most formidable force in firepower, the 4th Armoured Division, the very same that Instructor Nightheart belongs to. Elliot was kind of hoping that his friends would never find out, since he knows he hardly looks like a military man in contrast to his father. Wishing to change the topic, Elliot asks his sister if she happens to know what's located at the address they've been given, and Fiona recognises it as the old guild branch. She was good friends with someone who used to work there, though she's lost contact since it closed down a few years ago due to a huge fire on Alto Street. There have been rumours that it was started by terrorists, and Fee seems to know what went on back then. She keeps her thoughts to herself, however. Luckily for them, Marcius's father went through the trouble to secure brand new beds for their stay. Now the group can begin their field study tasks and get acquainted with Heimdall. First off, they help Elliot's friend, the local bar owner, track down a replacement copy of the beloved record Amber Amor, first released over 30 years ago. They must scour a good portion of the city for it, but are eventually able to secure a copy. They make a stop at Tricol's Plaza next, home of the majestic Valflame Palace. Group B runs into them by pure coincidence, so they seize the opportunity and make plans to meet for lunch later. Rean's group collects PR statements from various local businesses for the tourist pamphlet being released by the Imperial Chronicle for the summer festival. Then the two groups meet up at Plaza Biofrost for a late lunch. They split off again, with Rean's group accepting a monster extermination request from a hotel owner. However, before they head down into the underground passageway, they catch the Vita Clotilde as she descends the stairs. Elliot and Marcius are absolutely stunned to be meeting the Azure Diva, a legendary opera singer, in the flesh. She is relieved to hear that they will be taking care of the large monster in the underground passageway and wishes them luck before departing for her rehearsal. Rean can't help but feel like she seems somehow familiar, but he can't quite place his finger on it. Laura and Fee promise that they'll use this opportunity to finally make a successful combat link, but despite the girls' best efforts, the link is severed midway through the battle. The 5 of them are eventually able to bring the beast down, but Laura is clearly displeased with her performance. She requests to serve as a more supportive role for the rest of the field study, but Fee simply doesn't agree. The latter thinks she's the one who should be benched, but Laura cuts her off and apologises for her own immaturity. There's a prejudiced part of her that is still unable to accept Fee at this time. Rean denies Laura's request though, and declares that he'll be the one to withdraw from combat. From observing the two girls' fighting styles, he's concluded that they would be the perfect complement to each other. Laura dominates her enemies on the field, while the agile Fee creates openings for her. If they had fought in sync during this month's practical exam, none of the other pairs in Class 7 would have stood a chance. The girls are grateful for Rean's valuable perspective and decide to heed his advice. A bit further down the passage, Elliot's astute hearing picks up on the lovely melody of some sort of chamber group. They find a secret passageway that leads them in the direction of the sonata. Once they surface in Mater Park, Elliot recognises the musicians as old friends of his. He applauds their performance and all the strides they've made since entering the music academy, but the 3 only wish Elliot was attending with them. He was really good at violin, so they hold hope that he hasn't given up on it. Later that evening, Rean and the others are treated to a delicious home-cooked dinner prepared by Fiona, then Elliot invites them into his room. It's absolutely filled with various instruments and other musical equipment, to the point where there's no way music is just a hobby for him. Fee's the one to ask what's on everyone's minds. Why didn't he enroll at the music academy? Elliot finally opens up about his background, beginning with his late mother, a famous pianist. Elliot and his sister grew up listening to her beautiful music, but she tragically passed away 7 years ago due to illness. Fiona ended up following in their mother's footsteps, and Elliot had every intention of doing the same, but his father refused to entertain the idea that a proud Erebonian man could make his living solely off of music. Elliot really hated his dad for that, but no matter what he said, his father only recommended military academies to him. With no other choice, Elliot did some research and learned that Thors also offered music classes. Father and son agreed to meet halfway, and that's how Elliot ended up at Thors. Since enrolling, he thought he was getting over his obsession with music, but hearing his old friends play today has only shown him that he might not be as over it as he thought. Fee asks if he regrets it, but Elliot surprises everyone with his response. He says with conviction that there's no way he regrets coming to Thors now. He still gets to practice with the wind orchestra and honestly feels like Thors expands his horizons much more than the Music Academy would have. He's learning so much from their field studies, and he never would have met all of them otherwise. He sentimentally shares that he would regret that much more. After this heartfelt moment, they realise how late it's gotten, and the other four bid Elliot goodnight and start heading back to the old Bracer Guild. Hearing Elliot's story tonight has given Laura the resolve to challenge Fee to a duel. The latter seems like she was expecting this, and accepts, so Rean suggests they go back to Mater Park. Marcius still can't believe they're doing this once they arrive, but the girls won't back down. Before they face off, Laura admits that she couldn't see how the Jaeger way was anything but corrupt, especially when compared to knights who wield the sword. However, after looking honestly within herself, she's come to the conclusion that Fee is someone who's worthy of her trust. It's just taken her until now to reconcile those two opposing views she's had. Laura wasn't the only one who thought they'd never be able to get along. Fee saw how honestly the swordswoman lived her life and resigned herself to the idea that she'd never be accepted. As for Fee's past that Laura is so curious about, well, she wouldn't mind having to earn it as a spoil of war now, would she? Laura eagerly accepts the challenge, though she'll view it as an honour won after a well-fought victory. The two girls duke it out in a crazy display, but Rean calls the match before they land their final blows. They lay exhausted on the ground trying to catch their breath as Rean declares it a draw. However, Fee confesses that she lost this one. Jaegers fight at their best in the darkness, and yet their duel tonight still ended in a tie. She then tells Rean and Marcius that she doesn't mind if they stay, then launches into her history as a Jaeger. For as long as she could remember, she was surrounded by the war-torn lands of Jaeger Corps throwing themselves at the highest bidders. She wandered alone until the leader of Zephyr, the Jaeger King, took her in. He was crafty, stubborn, and always seemed so carefree, and yet he never let his guard down. Most importantly of all, he was the closest thing to a father she'd ever known. The other quirky members of Zephyr treated her kindly as she helped to cook and clean for them. Soon they began teaching her survival skills in their free time. The boss was initially reluctant to do this, but upon the other members' insistence, he made Fee a fully fledged member of the Corps. She went on to choose the name Sylphide and lived that way for a few years, never knowing if they would make it through the night. At last, the boss perished in battle last year against the Red Constellation's leader, the War God. The two duked it out for 3 days and 3 nights in a duel that ended with both of their deaths. Zephyr disbanded after that incident, and soon Fee was left all alone again. Sarah showed up not long after, since she was following the growing developments between the two strongest Jaeger Corps in western Zemuria. Fee was invited to the academy once Sarah heard her story, and the rest is history. Fee's story just strengthens Laura's resolve even more to continue expanding her perspective on the world. She helps her new friend up, then the two challenge the boys to a duel. The pair finally form a successful combat link and easily rough the lads up without breaking a sweat. These consecutive skirmishes in Mater Park haven't gone unnoticed, however, as the students find themselves having to answer to some cops for multiple noise complaints.
Elliot's pretty bummed that he missed out on the previous night's excitement, but is happy to see that Laura and Fee are buddies now. Then they get started on those field study tasks. They run into some initial hostility from the Port District's chief when he hears Laura speak for the first time. Reformists have a strong foothold in this part of Heimdall, you see, and loathe the idea of asking help from nobles who look down on them. However, the commoners of Class 7, Elliot, Marcius, and Fee stand up for Laura, resulting in the chief's realization that he's the one who's in the wrong. He leaves the monster extermination to the group, giving Fee and Laura the perfect opportunity to show Elliot their new combat link. The students find another secret passageway, this time leading them to the Ost district, where Marcius is from. Actually, he suggests that they order takeout from a local pub and head over to his home for a cup of coffee. Initial impressions are of honest surprise that this humble abode is home to one of the most important officials in the entire country. Well, what can he say? The fact is that he and his dad are commoners through and through. Fee notices an old picture of his family and asks who the young lady is. It turns out that she's Machias's cousin who lived close by. She used to come over and help him and his dad with household errands since it was just the two of them. Laura asks if she moved away, but it's revealed that she passed away 6 years ago. She was 9 years older than Machias, and he cherished her as a sister growing up. She was a lovely lady who had countless admirers to no one's surprise. Machias's father began rising in the government's ranks around this time, and one day one of Karl Regnitz's subordinates, the son of a duke, took notice of her. The attraction was mutual, and the two made a good couple. They eventually became engaged, but right at the same time, House Cayenne, one of the 4 great houses, proposed an arranged marriage. Furthermore, the nobleman's family would not stand to have him take a mere commoner as his wife, but they were limited in what they could do considering Karl Regnitz's position. So, they secretly began harassing and threatening Machias's cousin, making her life a living hell. Tragically, she never told a single soul during this entire ordeal, and finally took her own life after her fiancé promised to take her as his mistress. Machias was livid after learning all this, and Governor Regnitz took it upon himself to wrest all power from the nobles at City Hall with Chancellor Osborne's help. As for Machias, he grew to hate the entire nobility as a whole, everything from their culture to the entire idea of social classes. He sought to prove them wrong, to somehow win against them, but after arriving at Thors, he's come to accept that he was aiming his anger at the wrong people. His cousin's fiancé was doing his best to shield her from the ugliness of this reality, and his family was only acting in their best interests. Machias thanks Laura and Rean for helping him come to terms with the fact that not all nobles are bad people, and not all commoners are good. The two are touched by Machias's heartfelt sharing, though of course, Fee and Elliot can't resist teasing him over it. After lunch, the group receives an unexpected call from Governor Regnitz. A burglary has just occurred at the jeweler's in the Garnier district, with the thief leaving behind a message specifically addressed to Rean's group. Your suspicions are correct. It's another one of those infamous Phantom Thief B quests. They have a chance reunion with Baron Bleblanc while they're solving riddle after riddle. Then at last, Rean finally voices his suspicions about the man when they locate the stolen tiara. The Phantom Thief is thrilled that Rean figured this all out, then bids them all adieu before mysteriously teleporting away. Once Group A and B are finished with all their tasks, they head to St. Astraea's girls' school on Sarah's orders. Elise is the one to greet them and lead the way to the indoor rose garden in the back of the school, where nothing could have prepared them for this unexpected meeting with the one and only Princess Alphen. They all have a lovely chat over tea while waiting for the true main course. Then, the beloved bard himself makes his fabulous entrance. Princess Alphen must snap him out of his antics before he gets carried away, though. He then introduces himself as Prince Olivert, the ornamental chairman on Thors Academy's board. The group moves into a dining hall where the prince reveals how he conceptualized the idea of Class VII. His experience in Liberal ignited his desire to bring those same winds of change to Erebonia. So, first and foremost, he hopes Class VII will learn how to handle the conflicts that occur between various factions, the capital and the provinces,
tradition and technology, and even that between nations. This experiential learning and hands-on training is what he believes the youth need in these turbulent times.
Olivert's ideals can't be the only reason their class exists, however, since there are 3 board members after all. The prince confirms that he no longer has say over how Class 7 is run, as the directors are the ones who decide where they go and what they will be doing during their field studies. Rufus Alberea and Governor Ragnitz sit on opposite sides of the noble-commoner divide, and it's hard to discern Chairman Irina's true intentions. In spite of this, Olivert and Principal Van Dyke share high hopes that Class 7 will be a light that can push back the darkness stirring in this country. Their class actually owes a great debt to Sarah, as it was difficult to coax her out of her previous job. It's here that the students finally learn of their instructor's background as a truly exceptional bracer. Known as the Purple Lightning, she's the youngest bracer ever to achieve A rank. Finally, to wrap up the dinner meeting, Elise is none too pleased that Alfin asked Rean to be her dance partner at the garden party tomorrow, though the princess pulls back the request after sensing Rean's hesitation. She remains hopeful that he'll reconsider by next year, though. Right as the students are chatting about her past work history, Instructor Sarah shows up with an accompanying Captain Claire. The captain of the RMP needs to relay info on the important task the governor has just set up for Class 7 during the festival tomorrow. Back at Heimdall Station, the students receive a briefing about a possible terrorist attack. It'll likely be by the same group that Group A encountered in the Highlands last month. Since Heimdall is massive, Class 7 will be stationed to fill in the gaps in the RMP's security. The entire briefing is awkward at times due to the bad blood between Sarah and Claire, given what happened to the Erebonian Bracer Guilds. To wrap up the meeting, though, the students accept the anti-terrorism tasks that have been assigned to them. Sarah returns to the old Bracer Guild with Rean's group and explains what went down with the Bracer Guilds a couple years ago. Then everyone heads to bed. In the middle of the night, Rean is awakened by footsteps and finds Sarah downstairs. She's reminiscing over her time as a bracer. Though he shouldn't get the wrong idea, she thinks her life as Class 7's instructor is just as fulfilling as her life as a bracer was. Out at the Port District, Comrade G is rousing the workers' discontent for current society. They have big plans set in place for tomorrow. Rean's party begins their scheduled patrols and interrogate the citizens for any odd occurrences they have witnessed recently. They catch Vita and Crow, and even take some time to help out good old Mr. Bond from the Crossbell arc relocate his briefcase. They report their updates to Sarah at noon. Then they're instructed to keep an eye out on Princess Elfin to make sure she arrives safely to the garden party at Mater Park. In her limousine, it appears that Elfin has asked Elise to accompany her to the garden party. The princess continues to tease her friend about the crush she has on her brother until they arrive. Then Governor Ragnitz escorts them inside, allowing Class 7 to confirm the princess's safety. They continue their patrols and happen to catch Toa and Angelica at Dreikel's Plaza. It was actually Toa who passed on the governor's anti-terrorism request to Sarah, so the student council Prez and Angie came to check in on the situation themselves. Crow notices his friends and pops on over as well, lamenting his gambling losses for the day. Then, the fountains ominously start outpouring an unnatural amount of water. Then suddenly, highly pressurized water bursts from the manholes. A dire situation that immediately prompts Toa to take leadership. She'll work with Angie and Crow to evacuate the citizens, while Rean and the others go check on the VIPs at Mater Park. The scene is pure chaos as the Imperial guardsmen find their work cut out for them with the numerous encroaching beasts. A major commotion is clearly going down in the Crystal Garden, but since the RMP can't leave their posts, they leave the guests inside to Class 7. The terrorists have forcibly entered the venue via the giant crater in the ground and have trained their guns on the princess and Elise. Before an injured Governor Regnitz, Gideon proclaims the government officials' guilt by association with Osborne's faction. This comes as no surprise to the governor, who only requests that the girls be let go. G assures him that he has no intention of taking their lives, as their capture alone will fulfill their objective. Rean and the others, with weapons already drawn, rush in just in time to everyone's surprise. Gideon can't have these students foiling their plans again though, so he summons more alligator beasts as he and his comrades make their escape with the girls. Once the monsters are dealt with, the governor assures Class 7 that he'll be fine. Right now, they need to pursue the terrorists. Patrick, who was in attendance at the garden party, rushes over and demands to come with them, but Machias leaves his father's and the rest of the partygoers' safety in the noble boy's hands. Rean receives a call from Sarah and updates her on the situation. She and Captain Claire are on their way as they speak. It turns out that the terrorist plots at the racetrack and cathedral were swiftly dealt with thanks to the RMP forces and the invaluable help of Group B, though suspiciously enough, the garden party was the only venue where the Imperial guardsmen were stationed alongside the RMP forces. Knowing that the terrorists' main objective is just to tarnish the reformist faction's public reputation, it's basically assured that Princess Elfin's life isn't in danger. Claire can't say the same for Elise though. Hearing the RMP captain speak so coolly about a possible loss of life has Sarah turning away, unsurprised that they'll never see eye to eye. Down in the underground passageways, G reassures the princess that his cause respects the traditions of this nation and the blood of the Imperial family. After hearing this, Elise bravely interjects that her social standing should be enough and offers herself as the only hostage. Rean and the other students eventually come across what appears to be creepy catacombs from the Dark Ages. Fee knows they definitely came this way though, so they're left with no choice but to continue. They finally catch up to the terrorists, who soon find themselves surrounded. However, the girls are knocked out with an anesthetic, then G pulls out his trump card once more. Thanks to the tune of this ancient artifact, the demonic flute, the scattered bones of a terrifying dragon merge together and stands in the terrified party's way. But Rean snaps his friends out of their doubts and leads the charge against the ancient beast. Class 7 has learned their lesson one too many times at this point, so once the bone dragon is felled, Rean slices the ancient flute in two. Now, driven into a corner, Gideon whips out a knife and steels himself to do what he must for the success of this operation, even if it means bringing harm to a member of the royal family. But suddenly, a red-headed woman and stocky man leap out of the shadows to bail out G. Not only have his compatriots Comrade S and V shown up, but the masked man and obvious leader of the group, Comrade C, has as well. Bringing harm to a member of the royal family would do nothing for their cause now, so Princess Elfin and Elise are returned to the students. Then C draws his weapon, a double-edged saber and remnant of the Dark Ages, and challenges Rean, Laura, and Fee all at once. The three students can hardly scratch him, and Fee even compares his strength to that of Sarah's. For the very first time, C and the others announce themselves as the Imperial Liberation Front. Just when Sarah and Captain Claire finally locate the place, their arrival prompts C to detonate some explosives that begin to collapse the tunnels. But by Adios's blessings, they all make it out alive, and Elise and the princess thankfully come too. The next morning, before they depart back to Trista, Class 7 receives thanks from Prince Olivert, Princess Alphen, and Elise for all they've done to bring this entire terrorist situation under control. As for this Imperial Liberation Front, the Intelligence Division is doing its best to gather information on its leaders as they speak. Prince Cedric arrives just in time to give his heartfelt thanks, and Governor Ragnitz, who's fortunately on the mend, congratulates them on completing their field studies splendidly. At last, the Blood and Iron Chancellor himself enters the hall, and it's like all the air has been sucked out of the room. He's heard much about Class 7 and their fascinating field studies in these recent months. He's also glad to see that the new job is working out for Sarah. Since Principal Van Dyke was his superior in the army, he has prepared additional assistance for them all that he'll send over in a few weeks' time. Before Sarah can ask what he means by that, the imposing figure voices the high expectations he has for them in these turbulent times to come. Rean clutches his chest as he experiences another painful heartbeat, which brings Chapter 4 to a close. And thanks so much for watching, guys! Please spam the like button if you like this video, and big thanks to the Kiseki Nut who helped me with some narration. Go check out his channel and links in the description. Follow me on Twitter and Twitch if you're so inclined, and until next time, guys, take care. See ya!